Hello, everyone. Every day we see news items about fraudsters fooling citizens with threats and greed into giving away big amounts of their hard earned savings. Where does this money go? Well, it first goes into mule bank accounts, from there, through multiple layers, to the fraudsters themselves. So, naturally, the first point of control in this whole situation is the bank accounts, the mule accounts. To understand the problem and the solution, I have with me today two leading industry experts. First is Mr. Debasis Patri. He's the Chief General Manager at State Bank of India. Second, I have Rob Woods. He's the Director, International Market Planning, Financial Services SME at LexisNexis Risk Solutions. And I am Manoj Agrawal. I'm the Group Editor at Banking Frontiers. Welcome, Debashish, and welcome, Rob.
I am with State Bank of India since last 33 years. So right now I'm handling the group compliance function. Basically, I report to the group compliance officer, but it is the entire group compliance function oversight is with me. So that we are the largest bank in India, and we have multiple foreign offices overseas also.
Yes, thank you so much.
I'm Rob, so I work at LexisNexis Risk Solutions. I have a strategy role looking at kind of commercial and product strategy. In particular, I have a specialism internationally for financial services. So what that means in real life is looking at our banking customers and the banking industries, looking at those fraud trends where they differ in different countries and making sure that our customers and our products stay ahead of those challenges and those evolving trends. And when fraud MOs move and adjust or new tactics are used, that we are agile to it as well, and we help support our customers and our banks better protect their consumers. So that's sort of where I come in, and LexisNexis Risk Solutions as a whole, we operate globally. And for a bit of context, I think in the last year, in 2024, we had over 120 billion transactions flow through our network. So when we sort of see that activity around mules and fraud, we have that sort of volume that goes cross-border as well as domestic, all over the world. So we get a really good insight into fraudster behavior.
Super. We're going to talk first with the evolution of money mule tactics. With internet and card frauds accounting for most financial fraud cases in 23-24 among Indian banks, fraudsters are increasingly relying on money mules to launder stolen funds and evade traditional detection methods. So, Rob, should I begin with you? Could you share some recent statistics or trends on money mule activity? How widespread is the issue and how big is the problem growing?
Yeah, sure. I can start us off on that conversation. You could probably sum it up with a headline statement up front to say there is no digital fraud without money mules. If you want to stop all digital fraud, solve the mule problem is always the kind of saying. But it's a lot harder than it seems. So is it a growing problem? I think it's a massive problem, but it's probably a problem that globally the world is now shifting and focusing on more and more. So we're starting to see the size of the problem a lot clearer than we have in the past. I would say typically organizations care about their customers and their accounts and outbound payments. And when that payment is going out, that is when you're risk assessing, like, is this a genuine payment? They rarely cared about where it was going. It was just, is that customer making what they believe a genuine payment? And it was all about assessing that risk. It wasn't necessarily about where it was going. And also, as a bank, you didn't care as much about mule accounts in your organization because they weren't defrauding you as such. It was you were focusing on the account takeovers or the scams, and that was just a prioritization that we've seen globally. But I think now with the evolution of technology, how visible scams are and how critical mules are to scams, especially in countries where you have faster payments for instant payments. It's a really critical tool for fraudsters to use. So I think generally as an industry and regulators across the world are really focusing on money mules. And I've seen a few sort of articles around in India where 1.9 million mule accounts have been identified and treated as such, and that's great. But I would probably suggest that is tip of the iceberg, and it's a very good first step to tackling a problem, but it's a problem where it's always going to be growing. Fraudsters are always going to be trying to recruit mules or create mules. And I think the evolution has also changed in terms of you get what we call witting mules and unwitting mules. So people who are willing to do this and give me some money and you can use my bank account. There are some people who don't know that their account has been compromised and is being used. But we're also seeing a rise in people being forced and coerced into it through organized crime and things like that. So the evolution is there's three very distinct types of mules, and how you detect and how you manage and treat different types of mule accounts will vary. And in the coercion with organized crime, that's probably the worst one, because they are a victim themselves. And how do you support them as someone who didn't want to do this but was compelled to do it, and things like that. So I think the tactics are varied. They are quite in depth. They are clever fraudsters, sort of creating synthetic identities, open mule accounts where they can completely control it rather than just paying someone. And it is truly cross-border and international. You'll get your mule accounts domestically in country, but you want to exit money from that country quickly. So what are your cash out mechanisms and going from one mule to another and move the funds quickly? Does that help kind of position?
Yep. Thanks for the broader picture. Then maybe we should dive with Mr. Debasis on a little bit of the deeper picture. So Mr. Debasis, can you add to this and tell us what are some of the newer, some of the more sophisticated tactics that fraudsters are using to recruit and to operate?
In the current landscape, actually, the fraudsters have significantly advanced their tactics. They are no longer restricted to the traditional money mule recruitment part, like enrolling school children, housewives. Those things have gone because they have now realized that the banks and financial institutions have put in place enough measures to counter that. The law enforcement is also ready with many facts. So some of the key trends that as a banker we have observed is now they are now moving more towards something what we call is psychological manipulation. Basically, understanding the human psychology, these bad actors, they try to use tactics such as urgency, there is a fear, or they inculcate with something called the overwhelming enthusiasm to get some quick money. So these schemes are basically designed based on that. So if we look at it, it is more towards the exploitation of the digital platforms, as Rob said initially. And the psychological manipulation is also related to the exploiting the social media platforms. So we have various channels that are encrypted and that is being used. And particularly one thing that we are observing here is something called the remote working scams. So here actually people are lured with attractive advertisements through the social media channels, particularly if you visit the Telegram channel, sometime you will find people saying that if you do this investment in here, you will get a big money. And they are inducing people that they land into jobs which is called the managing of accounts and processing of payments. Basically, what happens, they take over your account and you start putting the money and route it through you, and some sizable chunk comes back to you. So that is how the strategy is being used. So I will cite here one example. Most of the banks in India, they use something what is called a cash management product. So that is primarily directed at the corporates. The corporates used to use that for their receivables, for their receivable payments, and also for paying salary to their employees. These are basically bulk upload facility. A corporate takes a internet banking facility and uploads everything, and it gets posted to the individual employee's account or to the supplier's account. So what they are doing, some of them are basically using that facility. So that is why banks in India are now very particular about who are they onboarding as a CMP client, as a cash management product client. So when you see some of these description, the purpose for which the funds have been transferred, you will suddenly find that it will be like for software services, for HR services. But actually, when you look at those transactions, they are not like that. They are because the activity of the corporate will be something else. And they will be all genuine corporates. You can blame it that there is no KYC or anything. Everything is genuine. So only thing, these are ways of making quick money. So apart from that, there is one more thing that we have observed is that there has been a localized recruitment campaigns. Like they are targeting specific demographics, specific communities, and accordingly tailoring their recruitment campaigns. So you will find in India, there are specific hotspots, some spots in Rajasthan area, some spots in Haryana, some in the Jharkhand state area, where you will find there are specific localized recruitment campaigns that go on. And in that, they are so advanced, they used AI chatbots, basically AI powered chatbots to engage into conversation. They access their suitability. Even I recently participated in one of the workshops where we came to know they also organize conclaves for their people and how to cheat. So this is the way we have moved far ahead now. And then there is one more thing. Earlier we used to have referral marketing. Here also they also have schemes called networking that through reference. So if you enroll one or two of your family members, you will get a referral fee. So these are all done through social media exploitation, because often such channels you will find the youths being advised to open in Telegram channel. Once we were displayed in one of the workshops, so they showed us how Telegram channel, they are directing the youth, look, this bank has now put in more control, so you should now move into some other bank because this bank has now a robust process in place and they are catching us. Similarly, they are asking them to open specific deposit accounts or specific assets. Like one of the that is being used by them is loans against securities. Normally, if you take a overdraft against a fixed deposit or a security, normally banks don't monitor. They think it's a normal account, but those accounts are being getting used as mule accounts, and sufficient money is being routed through that. And in addition to that, we have the online gaming and e-commerce platforms where the youth is falling prey to it. And plus, we have one thing that has coming up is now in e-commerce platform. Recently, ED said that we have in India so many local what we call the kirana stores or grocery stores or the local hardware stores. So they are being used to route the money, and ED in its raids, they have found out that some of the small grocery stores have logged in account turnovers of 25 to 40 crores Indian rupees in a single month. So this is how things are moving around, and we have now the Indian Premier League for cricket going on. So the UPI transaction channel is virtually choked, and this is now being a revised scheme to lure people towards the betting platforms. So, and all these are being done through use of by anonymizing the technologies. The fraudsters, they are employing VPNs, anonymizing the browsers. They are using encrypted communication platforms. So this is how the things have evolved now in India, and it is becoming a real challenge for the banks.
It is scary the way you described the multiple approaches and the intelligent approaches and the tech-enabled approaches that these networks are using. I also noted you said plus, 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 plus. So the problem is getting more and more widespread. The fraudsters are keeping one step ahead, it seems. Let's look at the solutions. How do you detect and prevent these activities? So what role do you see in terms of the challenge of data fragmentation? Is the data fragmented? Is that a problem? How are banks and financial institutions detecting and preventing this threat that you have described so many faces of? And what kind of gaps still remain according to you?
The gaps that still remain is that the technology that we use, the similar technology is still being used by the fraudsters. I will cite you one example here. You see, most of the banks are now using the AI/ML models to track this. They have set up real-time sales departments where people are working 24 by 7 to track the cyber frauds, to check the cyber frauds, to protect their depositors. So, particularly like in most of the banks are now what they are trying to do, they are putting in place a AI/ML model above their transaction monitoring application. Right now, what happens for a digital channel, the bigger challenges for the bank is the false positives. Because even if you have any model, what happens, the number of false positives that you get, it becomes very difficult for the bank to, even for the real-time transaction monitoring. So most of the banks, the bigger banks, what they have done, they are putting in place a AI/ML model above their transaction monitoring model. So what happens, whatever the alerts that comes from the scenarios, so those alerts again get the related AI/ML score, and the AI/ML model points to specific accounts which could be suspicious mule accounts. So that is one way it is happening. But what has happened is that the scenarios that the banks used in these models, there is a very big challenge for the bank, like how frequently they can modify it, because the fraudsters anyway, through their AI/ML model, they come to know that banks use which type of scenarios to catch them. I will cite one example. Like suppose there is a scenario in your for your mobile banking application, or whoever is using your internet banking platform, that someone who has changed his password, then he has added a third party for fund transfer, then he has remitted the money. So this is sometimes the banks consider this to be a red flag, because this happens so quickly. So they will start blocking. So what the fraudsters are now doing, they are waiting, they are changing the password, they are taking over the account, but they are waiting for 24 hours, then they are start going to execute the transaction. So here again, the banks have to build in and come back to what is called the behavioral biometrics. So some of the big banks, we in fact in my bank also, we have started implementing the behavioral biometrics, basically to identify the unusual user behaviors, such as you see the typing patterns or the navigation habits, which might indicate that the account is being operated by someone other than the legitimate owner. So, in addition to that, we also, as banks, we have challenges in the onboarding area. So a lot of government has taken a lot of initiative. We have come out with a central KYC registry. Banks can verify from the CKYC registry that whether who is the customer at the time of onboarding. So these are, and plus what we are also, banks are facing the awareness in the public. India being a country where in some areas the literacy level being not that high, the fraudsters are targeting those people. So this, there is a genuine need for the banks, for all the organizations, for NGOs to step in to improve the public, to have a public awareness campaign. So these are some
Right.
of the challenges and how banks are trying to meet them.
Yes, thank you for enlightening about that variety of things that banks are doing and need to do. Rob, maybe you can tell us from the technology perspective, what kind of technologies are making an impact? Could you also maybe describe how the technology evolved over the last couple of years to
Yeah,
catch
sure.
the sophistication of the problem?
Yeah, sure. And you can probably break it down into different parts of the customer journey, but some of the things that we just said around, behavioral biometrics, knowing the difference between a genuine user and trusting genuine customers versus impersonators and bots and automation are really important. But if I kind of try and tell the story through like the different parts of the journey. So you got to start at onboarding and where you're bringing new users into your ecosystem and having good tools there available at the onboarding stage to stop that first generation mules. And what I found really interesting because of what was said just now about there are set locations where certain fraud activity happen. That happens in every country around the world. India is no different there. Yeah, I could pick different countries and go, that city, or that region, they specialize in certain things. Or like, for example, in the UK, especially around the May, June time, are going to big university cities where you have an international population who are all going home for the summer or have just finished their studies, people being paid to say, hey, can I have your bank account? Because you're going home and you're never coming back. So here's £100 or £500. And it's a fully legitimate account that's handed over. And to be honest, if someone they've done their education and not coming back to the UK, why would they care? So like tackling onboarding is really an interesting thing. And to go along the theme around recruitment and geolocation, we've got tools and would recommend others to have similar tools where when you're doing your onboarding, where you might do a document scan and a selfie to prove who you are, right, as well as sort of the national identity schemes, like we've seen where multiple different people using their genuine IDs are onboarding very quickly, one after another, but they've got the same car interior in the background and they're in the same geolocation because some criminals are in a car driving around a particular residence, sort of area and, bribing, the younger generation say, hey, I'll give you X amount of money. Do you want to come in and open a bank account for us? And they sit in the car and do it. So you look for those sort of common threads and bringing in that, the machine learning and AI elements that were mentioned, even at onboarding, look for the deep fakes to stop your synthetic identity and sort of where they're trying to manipulate the document or their face. Look for the background stuff and try and stop things at the front door to catch that first generation mules. But there's only so much you can do there because, as we said, there's complicit mules and people who are genuine human beings who are opening an account and will be converted later. You then look at inbound payments. So traditionally, fraud prevention has always been screen the outbound, but if you screen the inbound payment coming in and you have that sort of network analysis, so you can say, well, hang on, this payment is coming from someone that they have no relation to, but we've seen that person who's paying doing this over here and looking at that beneficiary risk, so that inbound. So you as a receiving entity, is this potentially receipt of incoming fraudulent funds or is it a genuine payment? And I'm not suggesting that you do anything drastic in terms of a decision, but it's intelligence coming in. And that feeds your AI and machine learning models. Because if you start your onboarding, make that robust, start screening your inbound payments, and then you look at recruited mules and other sort of mule behavior, And what I mean by that is you can look at, for example, Bank A, identify a mule and, feed that back into a network like ours, for example. We don't just have that bank account. We have everything associated with that bank account in terms of the device, their behavioral biometrics, the email address or phone number, every data attribute associated with that mule account. And you might find another bank, Bank B, has a mule account with a completely different device and other different attributes, but there might be a common element, a common email or a common telephone number. So just one part of a digital identity that creates an association and a link between those two accounts. And by trying to leverage AI and the network effect is you look at what you have and you've identified one fraud, but then what potential mule accounts in that sort of hop analysis could you find by looking for common traits with other accounts across other banks or within your own bank? And so that is a very good investigative tool, which is good for sort of reducing your false positives. And to the previous point, when you've got account access, behavioral biometrics, a brilliant tool to know if there's automation happening, build trust in your genuine users. And to the point around false positives, and as someone who used to work in banking and authentication specifically, yes, fraud is what we want to stop. But you also want to create great customer experiences for the genuine people. You don't want to create a horrible where they've got to step up authenticate every time they want to check something. So if you can build in trust through behavioral biometrics, you can actually make for the majority of your customers a really great customer experience, but make it hard for the fraudsters. And then you sort of finish off the kind of ecosystem, you look at networks and consortiums. Something we found that is really beneficial to our customers, especially within a fixed geography like a country, is data sharing within the realms of privacy and government regulation. But that data sharing of bad actors, criminals, mule accounts, suspected mule accounts. So we have consortiums around the world, and those banks come together and agree the same definitions for what a mule is, what a suspected mule is. So they then can load into their networks and their consortiums. Here are confirmed mules, benefit from that, and then likewise they benefit from what their peers in the industry all working together. So creating a community feel is really powerful because bank and their network plus bank B and their network together really makes it difficult for fraudsters when you start working together. And then finally, you sort of having robust screening on your outbound payments, again, leveraging that network effect. So I think technology has a really important role through the kind of birth of AI to stitch everything together from that kind of onboarding through to the outgoing payment and bring in those risk signals from the link analysis of accounts, inbound payments, and bringing it all together into one view. And I think that's the key. Incredibly difficult, but that's the key to do, to try and bring bank architecture to work together in one cohesive way.
Interesting. So you're saying that it's the pattern across accounts, across banks, across organizations that can give leads.
Yeah,
and to identify and narrow down on the mule accounts.
Just even things like cashing out, because the comment around the hardware stores, you can see through patterns of behavior a mule account because someone might be logging in and checking an account again and again and again and again in quick succession because they're waiting for that fraud's their partner to finish the pay, like convincing that victim to send the payment. So they're checking, money has arrived. Oh, I'm making a payment. So when you look at that velocity, say they've logged in 10 times in the last 15 minutes. And then suddenly they're sending all the money out that they've just received. That looks a bit suspicious. And then you fill it in with it. So there's loads of different aspects to look at it.
Interesting. So it's not just the financial transactions, even the customer behavior. Otherwise, we can give clues.
Yes,
And maybe
definitely.
it could even be the time at which the person is checking the accounts. If
Yeah.
someone is checking the accounts frequently at midnight, maybe that's an indicator.
Yes.
Also, I want to touch upon, do international transactions give some kind of leads to detect mule accounts?
Yeah. International is sort of.
Cross-border.
But
Cross.
when you look at the world globally, your first mule account, like that first generation mule, it will be domestic in your country. Often it'll be within your bank because the fraud controls internally with one organization tend to be, well, we accept a bit more risk because the money is still within our control, it's within our bank. Then you've got to get it out of that bank to another bank. And then from there, you want to work it, either cash it out into real cash or send it internationally. And so we do quite a lot of analysis of actually each country has its own, should we say, set of countries where fraudsters tend to send their money. I know it sounds quite weird to say, but for example, in the UK, there are certain countries who target the UK in this type of organized crime. And so having money going to certain countries and transactions going to certain types of organizations and countries can be an indicator of it, just because there's high levels of organized crime in that particular country targeting your country. And that happens all over the world. And it's quite a fascinating thing to look at the flow of money.
Debasis, sir, are cross-border payments and transactions some kind of indicator in India today?
Yes, obviously, because ultimately it is the money that is laundered ultimately flows out of the country. It rarely remains within the country. So if you look at the current trends, it is getting converted to cryptocurrency. The victim is forced to invest. Like we have this something which is going on as the digital arrest. You might be hearing from the newspapers. So there is a new trend that has come up now, that digital arrests is not resulting in any ransomware payments. They are now blackmailing the unit to give access, the victim to give access to their account through digital arrest. They are keeping him on digital arrest for almost 2 to 3 days, and in that period, they're using his account to launder the money. Either it is going through the cryptocurrency channel or it is going abroad, because the bankers will simply not check a very senior citizen's account if some money is going abroad, and those things are happening in phases. It is not that the entire lot of money of $5,000 that go at one go. They will just break it into 2 3 different parts and they will send it. Even they are even aware about the restrictions, that the Reserve Bank of India FEMA guidelines says that you cannot remit more than $25,000 as an individual. So that is the $250,000. So that restrictions, they are also aware. So it is the fraudsters who are studying even the pattern, the cross border. And there is one more pattern. There are certain APAC countries where the due diligence is very less for money that is coming in. So those countries are being used for the cross border remittances. So you will find people in the APAC countries, particularly in the Vietnam, Thailand, that belt. You will find most of the money going to those areas. So what banks have started doing now, they have started checking having tools to identify the IP log. They have started looking at if there is somebody is using a VPN to access a account. So those are getting blocked, but still there are the multiple challenges still remain for money that is flowing out of the country through cross-border remittances.
Yes, the problem is getting wider and wider and hence bigger and bigger. So is some kind of collaboration increasing and getting better within a geography, within a jurisdiction, and then across jurisdictions? Any examples, any practical?
Across jurisdiction, I think we still have a long way to go. There are multiple challenges. Even if you want to get information from another jurisdiction, you need to have a bilateral agreement with them. Otherwise, the respective countries' privacy act will kick in. So, but within India, what I will speak, you see, the government has set up the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Centre, which we call I4C. It is under the Ministry of Home Affairs. And that agency has been doing phenomenal work. And they have created a centralized cybercrime database where to stop digital fraud that was launched sometime in September 2024. And now many banks have been integrated to that centralized cyber fraud database, which we call suspect registry, so that we are connected through API. So any transaction that happens and any complaint that lands in what they call the National Cybercrime Portal, it gets recorded there. And if that matches, then immediately with any particular bank account, then the account already a partial freeze or hold is placed. And if it is linked through API, that happens almost instantaneous. In my bank case, almost 91% of transactions they get hit through the API, and we get the immediate hold on the account within 2 to 3 minutes. So many times we have been able to block the money so that it doesn't flow out of that account. So the I4C has been playing a wonderful role, and this system has enabled the banks in India to track and flag cyber fraudsters in real-time basis. Also, I4C has taken steps. They have blocked the various Skype IDs, many WhatsApp accounts. They have their own intelligence. They keep on blocking that. And in addition to that, we have one more thing that the Department of Telecommunication has come up. They have released a substantial number of, a big number of mobile numbers which are fraudulent, and they have passed on that to the banks. So banks are now doing a reverse screening of their database to find out if any such mobile number is linked to any of the accounts. That is also allowing the banks to take action on those accounts. So, and in addition to that, we have the law enforcement agencies, the I4C, the banks. We are almost every month, there is a regular coordination meeting. The intelligence is getting shared. And in addition to that, the regulator in India has come out with a specific advisory on money mule accounts. So that indicating what are the priority areas for the regulated entities, what they should do, what type of monitoring they should have in place. And plus there is a regular reporting, like if a bank is having some suspected account we have found out, then we are also contributing to the suspect registry that the NCRP, National Cybercrime Portal, has. So this is more or less has created an environment in India that is helping the banks in arresting this challenge of cyber fraud through money mules. But a long way still to go, because there are many smaller banks which are still not onboarded in the portal, because they will be doing it slowly. But it is that challenge that will remain till all the banks are onboarded in the portal and we have a robust system in place.
Good to see that there's a structured approach to solving the problem, which is definitely going to be more powerful than some kind of unstructured approach. So, Rob, what kind of approaches do you see in countries around the world, or maybe groups like an EU or something?
So I would say even like groups like the EU, I would should we say reconfirm the point just made. Cross-border is incredibly difficult when you take in different regulators, different organizations, different ways and methods of making payments. And so that collaboration is very difficult cross-border, even in an entity like the EU. And I would probably say, I know this would sound like a sales pitch and it's not meant to be that, but that kind of void has been filled by organizations like ourselves who are global and cut across borders. And we have those sort of networks by having customers in multiple countries. So we can see that sort of activity and we can provide that intelligence because we see that through our own commercial success rather than legal entities of governments forming partnerships that may take years to create the legal framework for sharing information. So I would say the sort of private sector has really stepped in to help offer those tools to financial institutions. But collaboration really is key, and it's not just in financial services. Going back to sort of some of the previous points, you take about crypto. You got to bring crypto companies into the proverbial tent and sort of say, hey, you're part of the problem, but you're part of the solution as well. Don't alienate organizations because they are a source of pain for exiting of fraudulent funds. Bring them in and collaborate with them. Gaming and gambling firms as well, because the controls on them for how they cash out is a lot less on banks. So if you can find a victim who has a gambling account, just fund that gambling account do account takeover, fund that account with everything, and then take over the gambling account, add your own bank details to it, and exit that way. And because that will be weaker than via only system. So again, look broader than financial services, try and bring that collaboration and intelligence in from different sectors, telecommunications as well. And Telegram was mentioned. So, the social media firms. If you can try and bring everyone together to collaborate, that's really key. I also think we have a thing called truth data. So all our members, when they experience a fraud, they confirm that fraud back to us and say, oh, that transaction, that was a fraud, and these were the reasons why. And that truth data re-enriches the network, because you're confirming bad behavior and bad devices and bad digital identities into the network. And although outside of our domain, you would then say, so the collaboration within India and the official bodies is, how do you get companies of all sizes to provide confirmation of fraud back in, so then others benefit from it, and you get that sort of network effect. And the other thing I would say is organizations like ourselves, we're obviously a commercial entity, so we need to be successful, and that drives innovation. And that means the private sector will innovate faster than governments and central banks can. And what I would always encourage, because we engage central banks all over the world, is don't try and compete with the private sector, because you're a government agency or a government department. You only have so much funding and you've got big remits. Rather than try and figure out solutions to problems yourselves, seek inspiration from the private sector. Bring the private sector in and say, hey, how do you solve this problem? And I don't mean, oh, buy that solution, but they've achieved their success through trial and error and innovation. So skip the discovery and go straight to, well, they do it that way. That's successful for them in those countries. Let's replicate that ourselves somewhere else. It doesn't have to be buying that product. It could be just take the learning from it. We've got quite a lot of experience of working with central banks and saying, hey, this is who we are and this is what we do, and we operate in your country, and a lot of your members are customers of ours. And we do a lot of education with government agencies, sort of the ministers as well as the regulators, because if they understand what I would call the art of the possible, it then inspires them to go, oh, well, maybe we can do this as well, or we can do something different, or we've got more political power to force people to do, our members to provide certain information. Let's do that, because they've achieved success elsewhere. So I think collaboration comes in two forms. It's one in knowledge sharing and experience and collaboration between companies. But then there's collaboration between the people who own the customer and the people who are victims of fraud and the mule accounts. And how do you share that real-time intelligence for real-time sort of response to it? So it's almost like two levels, I would say. There's working together as a ecosystem and government and private industry. But then, as we've seen with our consortium, member banks all coming together and saying, hey, I want to share this data, between you, all within the realms of the data privacy regulation, but let me share these, bad IP addresses, bad devices, fraudster behavior, the categorized frauds, not necessarily genuine customers, it's the fraudster. And if you can share those attributes, then that helps each other, and you get that network effect of collaboration within a community.
Correct. So smarter thinking models, smarter data sharing needs are some of the ways to keep ahead of these fraudsters, who themselves are very innovative, and not just innovative, they're even aware of all kinds of loopholes and tapping into.
A really good example is just last week, we had all our UK customers all in the room having a conversation under Chatham House rules, which is it's not being recorded, you can speak freely, and they're sharing their experiences of, hey, have you started seeing this type of fraud? So, for example, the newest form of mule that we're seeing in the UK, for example, is I'm the victim, so I've been defrauded, and I am sending a fraudulent payment to a mule account. But rather than a mule account that is controlled by the fraudster, I'm actually sending it to a second victim. So someone who's not expecting, they're not a mule yet. So I'm sending it to them. The fraudster then calls them and scams them. Say, hey, you've just received money from this person. That was a mistake. I'm your bank. I'm here to help make it right. And by doing that second scam, because that person isn't expecting that inbound money, so it seems perfectly legitimate. And so they're like, okay, I'm going to help you. And suddenly they're providing more information to that fraudster, who then gets a second set of customer details to then scam them and make them make more payments. Or do account with them. So again, fraudsters being very clever at saying, well, you're getting better at detecting mules, so I'm going to send money to someone who isn't a mule yet, and then I'm going to turn them into a mule. Very brave, very bold, because it might not work, but it is again a way of trying to challenge traditional detection methods. So the banks were sharing information like that, say, have you started seeing this? And we're like, yeah. So again, just sharing your experiences as a banking community, as a financial services community, even anecdotally, there's real value in shared experiences.
That looks to me from our conversation so far that sharing and collaborating appears to be the most powerful method of curbing this menace, keeping it under limits. On that note, any final comments from either of you gentlemen?
I will say that there are now multiple challenges, not only from the regulatory front from the banks to the banks, because the regulations and the regulators have come up with new guidelines, and if you miss implementing those guidelines or not comply with those guidelines, you are liable, and might be in the wrong side of the regulators and getting a penalty, on a very big penalty. Another challenge that the banks will face here is the courts. The courts, they rule in a different way. Actually, there is some high court ruling, if you have read, that has come up, that they say even if the money is routed through the bank, and there is because it has passed through an account which is onboarded by the bank, so the bank is also responsible to repay back. So there have been a few court judgments like that. So there are challenges, and particularly for India, when the Digital Personal Data Protection Act comes into being, so there will be very big challenges for banks, even for sharing information with their counterparts. And here, new regulations, the FIU has to step in to see to it that the things fall in line. So there will be multiple challenges for the bank, but as a banking industry, I think we will all live up to the expectations of the regulators. All the banks are working in unison in India, and this menace will be curtailed definitely.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for that. cautious and positive statement about what's the near future is going to be like. Any closing remarks from you, Rob?
Just two things. Work with regulation, work with regulators, work with authorities. Embrace it rather than have the attitude of, oh, I must do this. Use it as a reason to innovate and say, okay, they're asking me to do that, but maybe let's build our systems to do more and be better. So take regulation as a challenge, as an opportunity, not I must do this. This is horrible to do. Embrace it. The other thing I would say is don't forget customer experience. Yes, we're trying to find the bad guys, we're trying to find the mules, but there's many genuine customers who want to transact online safely, and making sure whatever you do, you avoid the false positives, you avoid the trips to court, as was just mentioned, because try and make better decisions at the right time, and then that will make the problem easier down the line. So don't forget false positives and customer experience when coming up with your anti-fraud strategy.
Sounds good. Sounds good, like a good approach to managing the solution in a meaningful manner.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Mr. Patri, for this insightful conversation on the problem of money mules, how it is getting worse, and how the financial system and other regulators and other players are working together to bring it under control. I really wish the good forces of good win over the forces of evil in this long battle. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Rob. Thank you. Thank you, Manoj.